Imagine a world where warrior women ruled unchallenged, a civilization so powerful and wealthy that their cities were said to be built entirely of shimmering, untold gold. This isn't a fantasy novel or a Hollywood invention. It's one of history's most enduring and captivating mysteries, a tale that has ignited imaginations and fueled real-life expeditions for thousands of years. From the legendary stories whispered by ancient Greek poets to recent archaeological discoveries that blur the line between myth and reality, the Amazons and their fabled cities of gold remain a tantalizing puzzle. Wherever you're joining us from around the world, and whatever hour marks your dive into this journey of discovery, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments where you're tuning in and what time your own exploration into the past begins tonight. This is more than just a story. It's a quest that has driven kings, adventurers, and scholars to venture into uncharted lands, all searching for proof of a society that defied expectations and challenged everything the ancient world thought it knew about power, gender, and civilization. Were the Amazons just a symbol conjured by poets to embody fears and ideals, or did these fierce women truly build gleaming cities hidden deep within vast, untamed landscapes? This question has echoed across centuries, inspiring both wonder and debate, and it's a mystery that continues to unfold even today with each new clue uncovered by dedicated researchers. In this video, we're setting out on an adventure through time, piecing together evidence from dusty scrolls, enigmatic artifacts, and groundbreaking excavations. We'll travel from the heart of Greek mythology to the remote corners of Eurasia, separating tantalizing facts from elaborate fiction as we ask, could the legend of the Amazons and their golden cities be rooted in truth? Strap in for a journey into one of history's greatest enigmas. You might just find that some myths are far more real than they first appear. Our story begins not with a spade in the dirt, but with a quill on parchment in the epic verses of Homer's Iliad. Written nearly 3,000 years ago, this foundational text of Western literature offers our first written glimpse of the Amazons, referring to them as Antianarai, a term scholars translate as those who fight like men. Here, they are not the central characters but a benchmark of martial prowess, a legendary foe from a distant land that the Trojan hero Priam once battled in his youth. This early mention sets the tone. The Amazons are already a renowned, almost mythical standard for warfare, existing at the very edges of the known world. But the legend truly deepens with the historian Herodotus, often called the father of history. Writing in the 5th century BCE, Herodotus dedicates significant passages to these warrior women in his histories, moving beyond myth and attempting to document their customs and origins with a more ethnographic eye. He weaves a tale of a group of Scythian warriors who, after a battle, encountered a tribe of Amazons. Rather than fighting, the two groups eventually intermarried, and their descendants formed a new society, the Sauromations. Crucially, Herodotus notes that the Sauromacian women continued the Amazonian traditions. They rode horses, hunted, and went to war, and they did not marry until they had killed an enemy in battle. This account is monumental because it represents one of the first attempts to ground the Amazon myth in a real, identifiable people and place, the vast steppes of Scythia north of the Black Sea. It is within the rich tapestry of Greek mythology, however, that the Amazons become unforgettable characters, constantly challenging the greatest Greek heroes. Their most famous clash came in the labors of Heracles. His 9th labor was to retrieve the magical girdle of the Amazon queen Hippolyta, a symbol of her power and authority. The myths diverge on the outcome. Some versions say Hippolyta was willing to give it to the hero, while others describe a violent battle resulting in her death. Another pivotal encounter occurs in the Trojan War, where the Amazon queen Penthesilea, a daughter of the war god Ares, leads her warriors to fight for Troy. In a tragic twist of fate, the Greek champion Achilles slays her in single combat, only to be struck by her beauty and courage as he removes her helmet. These stories were far more than simple entertainment. They served a profound cultural purpose. The Amazons represented the ultimate other, a powerful, inverted society where women held all the political and military power. They were a device used to define Greek identity by its opposite, reinforcing Greek ideals of patriarchy and civilization by contrasting them with a fearsome, foreign matriarchy. A fascinating and critical aspect of these ancient accounts is their deliberate geographical vagueness. The Greeks consistently placed the homeland of the Amazons elsewhere. It was always beyond the borders of their mapped world. Homer located them in Asia Minor. Later writers pointed to Libya or the island of Lesbos. Herodotus firmly placed them in Scythia. This shifting, nebulous location is a key piece of the puzzle. It wasn't that the Greeks were bad at geography. This ambiguity was intentional. By placing the Amazons in uncharted territories, they reinforced the idea that such a society could not possibly exist within the familiar confines of the civilized world. They were a people of the fringe, of the unknown. This very vagueness, however, would act as a siren call for centuries to come, inviting explorers, conquerors, and archaeologists to venture into the blank spaces on the map, forever searching for the truth behind the terrifying and tantalizing legend. For centuries, the Greek image of the Amazons remained just that, a powerful myth from a faraway land. But as the world expanded during the Age of Exploration, this ancient legend collided explosively with the stark realities and fervent ambitions of the New World, transforming from a poetic metaphor into a tangible goal that would drive men to their doom. The catalyst for this shift was a potent mix of indigenous tales and European greed, a fusion that birthed one of history's most compelling and dangerous quests. The spark was struck by the Spanish conquistadors, who arrived in the Americas consumed by a singular, glittering obsession: gold. They had already toppled the vast empires of the Aztecs and Incas, plundering their immense wealth, and were utterly convinced that even greater treasures lay hidden in the continent's unexplored interior. As they pushed into the dense, uncharted jungles of South America, they began to hear tantalizing stories from local tribes, stories of a powerful chieftain who ruled a land of unimaginable riches. This was the legend of El Dorado, the Golden One, a king so wealthy he was said to cover his body in gold dust during sacred ceremonies. In the fevered imaginations of the Spanish, this figure was not just a man but a king who ruled a city made entirely of gold. It was into this cauldron of rumor and avarice that the Amazon myth was thrust, irrevocably merging with the quest for El Dorado. The key figure in this fusion was Francisco de Orellana, a conquistador who in 1541 became the first European to navigate the entire length of the immense river that would eventually bear the name Amazon. His expedition was a desperate journey of survival, plagued by starvation, disease, and hostile encounters. But in his official report, Orellana's lieutenant, Friar Gaspar de Carvajal, documented something that sent shockwaves through Europe: a violent encounter with a tribe of fierce, light-skinned women warriors. Carvajal vividly described them fighting alongside men, firing arrows with deadly accuracy, and living in large, sophisticated communities. He claimed they lived in white cities that gleamed in the sun, and he referred to them explicitly as Amazons. Though Orellana himself likely perished before he could return to Spain, his account, as recorded by Carvajal, was a sensation. The report was a perfect storm. It took the classical Greek legend and planted it squarely on a map of South America, giving it a terrifying new reality. European chroniclers and mapmakers, who were already busy filling the continent's blank spaces with illustrations of cannibals and giants, eagerly seized upon this story. They began to depict the Amazon rainforest not just as the home of El Dorado, but as the domain of these warrior women who are now the guardians of the Golden City. The two myths became inseparable. To find one was to find the other. This powerful narrative was not merely a story, It was a call to action that would fuel expeditions for the next 2 centuries. Men like Sir Walter Raleigh would later venture into the Guyanese jungle, risking everything based on these amplified tales, convinced that just beyond the next river lay a society of wealthy, powerful women and their incalculable treasure. The legend, born in ancient poetry and supercharged by conquistador ambition, had become a historical force in its own right. Yet for all the power of these written accounts, they remained just that, stories. The true turning point in our search for the Amazons arrived not with another ancient text, but with the unearthing of silent, powerful evidence from the earth itself. Archaeology would finally provide a tangible connection, shifting the quest from the realm of legend to the field of scientific discovery. This evidence emerged from the vast, windswept steppes of Eurasia, from ancient burial mounds known as kurgans that dot the landscapes of modern-day Ukraine, Russia, and Kazakhstan. For generations, these grassy hills were simply part of the scenery, but to archaeologists, they represented sealed time capsules, preserving the secrets of the nomadic Scythian cultures that Herodotus himself had written about so long ago. The revelations began in earnest throughout the 20th century and continue to this day, with each excavation adding more pieces to the puzzle. Perhaps one of the most compelling finds was made at a site called Pokrovka near the Russian-Kazakh border. Here, archaeologists unearthed graves that fundamentally challenged our understanding of ancient nomadic life. They discovered the remains of women buried with unequivocal honor and purpose. These weren't mere symbolic gestures. These women were interred with the full regalia of warrior elites. Their graves contained iron swords, quivers full of bronze-tipped arrows, and cunningly crafted bows. But the evidence went even further than the weapons themselves. Some of these female skeletons showed clear, horrific signs of battle trauma. We find bones marked by the brutal impact of battle axe wounds and skeletons with arrowheads still embedded deep within the bone, telling a story of a life that ended in violent conflict. The most striking were the remains of a young girl, no older than 13 or 14, found with her bowed legs indicating a life constantly on horseback, and beside her a full quiver of 40 bronze arrows. This was not a woman who was associated with war. She was a participant, and her community buried her with the highest honors befitting one. These findings paint a vivid picture of a society radically different from the settled, patriarchal civilizations of Greece and Persia. The Scythians were nomadic pastoralists, and their survival on the open steppe demanded a unique social structure. Every able-bodied person was a critical resource. Women were not secluded, they were essential. They were expert horse riders and master archers, skills necessary for both hunting and protecting their herds and communities from rival tribes and predators. This practical way of life created a culture where gender roles were far more fluid than in the ancient Mediterranean world. A woman's value was measured by her contribution to the tribe's survival, not by her confinement to a domestic sphere. When we hold these archaeological discoveries up against the ancient Greek texts, the parallels are nothing short of astounding. The Greek writers described the Amazons as horse-riding archers who lived in a society where women fought and led. The Scythian women of the steppes were horse-riding archers who fought and were buried as leaders. It seems increasingly probable that the Greeks, encountering or hearing tales of these formidable Scythian and Sarmatian women from traders along the Black Sea, did not purely invent the Amazons. Instead, they took the reality of these powerful foreign women and amplified it into a mythic archetype, a powerful other to define themselves against. The archaeological record doesn't give us cities of gold, but it gives us something far more valuable, a credible origin for one of history's greatest legends, revealing that the Amazons were likely inspired by the very real, very formidable warrior women of the Eurasian steppes. So we have the vivid accounts from the ancient Greeks and the compelling archaeological evidence from the steppes, but the legend of the Amazons was about to make one of its most dramatic geographical leaps, crossing an ocean and attaching itself to the largest river on Earth. This brings us to the mid-16th century and the saga of a Spanish conquistador named Francisco de Orellana. His harrowing journey would irrevocably link the name Amazon to a vast, unexplored wilderness and supercharge the hunt for golden cities with a tantalizing new piece of evidence. In 1542, Orellana and his men were part of a large expedition tearing through the jungles of South America, desperately searching for spices and the ever-elusive El Dorado. The mission was fraught with hardship, starvation, disease, and hostile encounters with indigenous tribes were a constant threat. Separated from the main force, Orellana and a small group built a brigantine and made the fateful decision to sail down an enormous, unknown river, hoping it would lead them to the sea and salvation. Their voyage was a descent into a world of staggering scale and danger, but it was one specific encounter, meticulously documented by Orellana's friar, Gaspar de Carvajal, that would echo through history. Carvajal's account describes a brutal attack by a powerful tribe. He wrote that the Spanish were assaulted by tall, pale-skinned warriors who were led and fiercely aided by nearly naked women. These women fought with terrifying ferocity, loosing arrows with deadly accuracy and rallying the male warriors when they attempted to retreat. Carvajal, drawing directly from the classical education of a European scholar, did not hesitate to name them. He called them Amazons, drawing a direct parallel to the legendary women from Greek myths. He even added a compelling mythical detail, claiming these women lived apart from men in well-ordered, prosperous communities he called white cities, and only interacted with them at specific times to reproduce. For Orellana, struggling to justify a journey that could be seen as desertion from the main expedition, this incredible story was a godsend. It was a tale of a powerful, wealthy civilization that would surely justify a return voyage for glory and conquest. He named the mighty river after them, and the Rio de los Amazonas was born. However, this account has been met with intense skepticism from historians for centuries. The central question is stark: did Orellana and Carvajal truly witness a matriarchal warrior society, or was this a calculated fabrication? The motivation to exaggerate was powerful. A story of mythical warrior women guarding rumored riches was the perfect tool to secure funding from the Spanish crown for a return expedition. It transformed a desperate tale of survival into a promising report of discovery. Some scholars suggest the attackers may have been long-haired male warriors whom the Europeans, in the heat of a chaotic battle, simply misidentified as women. Others propose that Carvajal, a man of the church, might have interpreted a complex indigenous ritual or social structure through the only lens he had: the classical legends of his homeland. This is where indigenous stories offer a fascinating alternative perspective. Anthropologists studying tribes across the Amazon basin have documented numerous traditions that feature powerful female figures and matrilineal societies. Tales of women who were skilled hunters and warriors, or who held significant spiritual and political power, are not uncommon. It is entirely plausible that Orellana's expedition heard fragments of these local myths and legends from the tribes they encountered or traded with along the river. Their own cultural background, steeped in the Amazon myth, would have predisposed them to interpret these stories not as distinct local beliefs, but as confirmation of the classical legend they already knew. The reality on the ground may have been a complex tapestry of indigenous culture that the Spaniards, either deliberately or unconsciously, wove into the familiar and exciting narrative of the Amazons. Regardless of its literal truth, the naming of the river had a profound and lasting impact. It cemented the idea of a hidden, powerful female-led civilization deep within the South American interior. The Amazon River itself became the central artery for the quest, the supposed highway that would lead explorers past every dangerous rapid and through every twisting tributary straight to the golden cities of these legendary women. The myth, now physically anchored to the greatest geographical feature on the continent, ceased to be a distant European story and became a new world obsession, drawing countless adventurers to their fate in the relentless green depths of the rainforest. While the Spanish were primed by their own classical education to see Amazons in the New World, they were equally captivated by a homegrown legend that promised wealth beyond their wildest dreams, a story born not from Greek poetry but from the sacred rituals of the Muisca people in the highlands of modern-day Colombia. This was the original El Dorado, or the Gilded One. Unlike the later fantasy of a golden city, El Dorado began as a person. During an intricate inauguration ceremony for a new Zipa or chief, the ruler would journey to the center of Lake Guatavita on a ceremonial raft. His body was entirely covered in precious gold dust, and he was surrounded by attendants adorned with exquisite gold ornaments. As the raft reached the center, the chief and his court would toss vast quantities of gold and emeralds into the deep, dark waters as an offering to the gods. For the Muisca, this was a profound act of spiritual devotion and political power, a symbolic exchange that cemented the chief's connection to the divine. For the Spanish, however, it was a literal treasure map. When conquistadors first heard fragments of this ritual from captured indigenous people, their imagination did the rest. They took a symbolic act and transformed it into a literal, physical place. The Gilded One became a Golden One, and that Golden King was soon believed to rule a city made entirely of gold. This conflation was a predictable outcome of the conquistadors' unquenchable avarice and their inability to fully comprehend the symbolic nature of indigenous storytelling. The lust for this legendary city became an obsession, drawing wave after wave of Europeans into the deadly interior of the continent on doomed expeditions. Perhaps no single venture better exemplifies this tragic, obsessive hunt than the one launched by Gonzalo Pizarro in 1541. Fresh from helping his brother Francisco conquer the Inca Empire, Gonzalo was appointed governor of Quito and immediately began organizing a massive expedition to find La Canela, the land of cinnamon, and the richer prize he believed lay beyond it, El Dorado. His force was staggering: over 200 Spanish soldiers, thousands of indigenous porters, and herds of swine and llamas for food. They marched east into the Amazon basin, a journey that quickly devolved into a nightmare. The promised cinnamon trees were sparse and worthless, the terrain was impenetrable, and the torrential rains never ceased. Men and animals succumbed to disease, starvation, and attacks from hostile tribes. It was during this disaster that Pizarro sent Francisco de Orellana ahead on a scout mission to find food and a route forward, a decision that led to Orellana's fateful journey down the river and the fateful christening of the Amazon. Decades later, the quest was taken up by the English courtier Sir Walter Raleigh, who became utterly captivated by the legend. He conducted extensive research, interviewing returned explorers and studying Spanish accounts, and became convinced that El Dorado, which he located on a map in the highlands of Guyana, was the key to England's imperial dominance. His expeditions, detailed in his book The Discovery of Guyana, were pitched to Queen Elizabeth I as a strategic move to counter Spanish power, but they were equally fueled by his personal desire for glory and gold. Raleigh's journeys, much like Pizarro's, ended in failure, hardship, and death, but his writings further popularized and solidified the intertwined myths of El Dorado and the Amazons for a whole new European audience. This merging of myths created a powerful and enduring feedback loop. The Spanish had arrived with the myth of the Amazons and then discovered the legend of El Dorado. In their minds, it was only logical that these two incredible wonders, a city of gold and a civilization of warrior women, must be connected. Perhaps the Amazons were the fierce guardians of the Golden City, or maybe El Dorado was the magnificent capital of their empire. The allure was no longer just about finding a society of powerful women. It was about claiming their unimaginable wealth. This transformed the Amazon from a mythological concept into a geographical destination for conquest, embedding the legend so deeply into colonial history that it continues to shape our perception of the rainforest to this day. The search for proof was no longer just an academic exercise, it was a literal, often fatal treasure hunt. Yet even with these tantalizing archaeological finds and colonial accounts, we are left with a profound question. Were the Amazons a one-of-a-kind anomaly, or is the concept of a powerful, female-centric warrior society something that has emerged in cultures across the globe? When we expand our view beyond the steppes and the rainforest, we discover that the ancient Greeks may not have been describing a singular, impossible society, but rather tapping into a human archetype that has manifested in various forms throughout history. One of the most striking and well-documented examples comes from West Africa with the Mino, a military corps famously known as the Dahomey Amazons. This was not a mythical construct but a formal, elite fighting force within the kingdom of Dahomey, present-day Benin, who served from the 17th century until the late 19th century. These women were not merely auxiliaries, they were the king's most trusted and fearsome regiment, rigorously trained, celibate, and renowned for their sheer discipline and brutality in combat. European colonists who encountered them wrote of their shock and admiration at their skill and fearlessness. The existence of the Dahomey Amazons is a powerful counterargument to anyone who claims that the idea of an army of women is purely a figment of mythological imagination. Here was a real, documented, and highly effective corps that held a central place in the power structure of a major kingdom for hundreds of years. We can find other fascinating cultural parallels that challenge traditional patriarchal structures. Consider the Nair community in the southwestern Indian state of Kerala, who practiced a matrilineal system known as Marumakathayam. In this society, lineage and inheritance were traced through the female line, with families organized around the mother and her relatives. While the Nair were not exclusively warrior women, their social structure placed significant economic and social authority in the hands of women, creating a power dynamic that was utterly foreign to the patrilineal norms of most other cultures. This system, which persisted for centuries, demonstrates that societies organized around female kinship and authority are not only possible but have functioned successfully. Such examples provide a crucial anthropological context, suggesting that the Greek descriptions of the Amazons, while likely exaggerated, could have been a distorted reflection of real societies where women held roles of power, authority, and martial skill that were unimaginable in the city-states of Greece. This brings us directly into the heart of the modern scholarly debate, which has moved far beyond a simple true or false binary. Academics now navigate a spectrum of compelling interpretations. On one end, some argue the Amazons were indeed a complete fabrication, a powerful rhetorical device used by Greek men to reinforce their own cultural identity. In this view, the Amazons were the ultimate other, a terrifying inversion of the natural order that served to justify the subjugation of Athenian women by presenting the alternative as a monstrous foreign chaos. They were a warning tale, a symbolic representation of the fears and anxieties a patriarchal society held about female power and autonomy. A more widely accepted theory sits in the middle ground, suggesting the legends were a distorted account of real tribes. As we've seen with the Scythian burials, it is highly probable that Greek traders and colonists around the Black Sea encountered nomadic cultures where women played a far more visible and powerful role in public life, including warfare. The Greeks, trying to process this shocking cultural difference, amplified and codified these encounters into the myth of a society completely dominated by women, where men were marginalized or excluded. It was a case of cultural telephone where a kernel of truth was embellished into a fantastic story that better fit their narrative needs. A third, more nuanced perspective views the Amazons not as a record of a society, but as a reflection of deep-seated fantasies. These myths often involve the greatest Greek heroes like Heracles and Achilles, ultimately subduing and conquering these powerful women. This narrative could be interpreted as a symbolic act of mastery, a way for the Greek psyche to acknowledge the terrifying allure of female power while simultaneously asserting control over it. The debates between these schools of thought are not merely academic. They force us to confront how history is written, how cultures understand each other, and why some stories, whether based in fact or fear, capture our imagination and endure for millennia. The truth of the Amazons likely lies not in a single explanation, but in a complex blend of all three, a potent mixture of observed reality, cultural bias, and powerful symbolism. For a long time, the prevailing view of the Amazon was not one of lost cities, but of a vast, impenetrable wilderness, a green hell, that was largely untouched by humans except for small, nomadic tribes. This idea, known as the pristine myth, suggested that the rainforest was a natural paradise incapable of supporting the large, complex societies necessary for a civilization like the Amazons to exist. But a revolution in archaeological technology has completely overturned this centuries-old assumption, peeling back the jungle canopy to reveal a hidden human history written into the very earth. The key to this breakthrough is a remote sensing technology called LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. Imagine being able to strip away millions of trees, vines, and plants with the click of a button, creating a detailed three-dimensional map of the ground beneath. That's precisely what LiDAR does. Mounted on aircraft, it fires millions of laser pulses at the jungle floor. By measuring how long they take to bounce back, it constructs an incredibly precise digital model of the terrain, revealing human-made structures completely invisible to the naked eye. What LiDAR and ground excavations have revealed is nothing short of astounding. Across the Amazon basin, from Brazil to Bolivia, researchers are finding evidence of enormous geometric earthworks called geoglyphs. These are not piles of stone like the pyramids, but intricate patterns, perfect circles, squares, and octagons, dug deep into the soil, forming vast ceremonial landscapes that span hundreds of meters. Then there are the remains of extensive road networks, wide causeways that connected settlements across miles of flooded forest, and sophisticated moats and defensive ditches that speak of a society that was organized, territorial, and capable of large-scale coordinated labor. We're also finding evidence of advanced agriculture that goes far beyond simple slash and burn. These ancient peoples practiced something called terra preta, or dark earth. They intentionally created incredibly fertile soil by mixing charcoal, pottery shards, and organic waste into the naturally poor Amazonian earth. This human-made soil is so rich that it remains productive for centuries, allowing for the kind of intensive farming needed to support large, permanent populations. One of the most compelling sites is known as Cuhacugu, located in Brazil's Xingu region. Archaeological work here has uncovered the remnants of a sprawling network of towns and villages, all connected by those straight, wide roads and surrounding large central plazas. Estimates suggest that at its peak, this cluster could have been home to upwards of 50,000 people. They engineered the landscape to manage its resources, creating fish weirs, sophisticated traps in the rivers, and cultivating orchards of useful trees. This was not a nomadic existence. It was a structured, sophisticated society that mastered its environment. So what does this have to do with the Amazons and their cities of gold? These discoveries don't give us warrior women clad in golden armor, but they do provide something perhaps more significant, a plausible historical stage. The early Spanish accounts, like Carvajal's, spoke of large, prosperous villages, white cities gleaming on the riverbanks, and extensive networks of roads and trails. For centuries, historians dismissed these descriptions as fantastical exaggerations, but modern archaeology suggests they may have been reporting what they actually saw, or at least a version of it. The populations that created Cuhacugu and the geoglyphs were largely decimated by European diseases like smallpox, which spread ahead of the explorers themselves, collapsing these societies long before they could be properly documented. The empty jungle the conquistadors struggled through was likely a recent catastrophe, the ghost of a civilization that had just vanished. The legends of powerful, wealthy societies hidden in the jungle, which so captivated Orellana and Raleigh, may have been rooted in the fading memory of these very real, very advanced cultures. While we haven't found a city made of gold, we are finding cities of earth, of pottery, and of expertly managed forest, a discovery that forces us to rewrite the history of the Amazon and reconsider the possible truths hidden within its most enduring legends. But if the legend of the Amazons was supercharged by the search for gold, what was the reality of this precious metal for the peoples of the Americas? To understand the chasm between myth and reality, we must step away from the conquistadors' treasure chest and into the spiritual world of the indigenous cultures themselves. For the Spanish, gold was currency. It was a measure of wealth, a means to power, and its value was purely economic. But for the societies they encountered, gold held an entirely different, profoundly sacred meaning. It was not a symbol of earthly wealth, but a physical manifestation of the divine. The luminescent, sun-like quality of gold connected it directly to celestial power, life-giving energy, and the realm of the gods. It was used not to buy goods, but to commune with spirits, to adorn priests and chieftains during sacred ceremonies, and to create objects of breathtaking beauty that were meant for temples and tombs, not for markets. This distinction is powerfully illustrated by the incredible artifacts discovered throughout the region. In the Andes, the master craftsmen of the Moche, Chimu, and Inca civilizations created spectacular golden masks, ceremonial knives, and elaborate jewelry depicting their gods and mythic creatures. These were items of ritual power. In the Amazon basin itself, tribes crafted intricate golden pendants, nose rings, and chest plates, often using a technique called lost wax casting to produce finely detailed works of art. These objects were not hoarded like coins in a vault. They were worn in life to signify status and spiritual connection, and they were buried with the dead to accompany them into the afterlife. The value was in their meaning, not their mass. No single story captures this cultural clash better than the original legend of El Dorado at Lake Guatavita in Colombia. As we touched on earlier, the Muisca people performed a magnificent ceremony for a new leader. Covering his body in gold dust was an act of transformation, making him a living embodiment of the sun god for this sacred rite. The offerings tossed into the lake were a gift to the deities, a sacrificial exchange to ensure the prosperity and balance of the entire kingdom. When the Spanish heard a fragmented version of this story, they filtered it through their own relentless greed. They saw a king covered in gold and immediately thought of unimaginable personal riches. They heard of treasures thrown into a lake and envisioned not a spiritual offering, but a literal trove waiting to be salvaged. Their infamous, disastrous attempts to drain Lake Guatavita in search of that gold stand as a perfect monument to this catastrophic misunderstanding. They were looking for bullion at the bottom of a lake, completely missing the profound cultural and spiritual practice that was actually happening on its surface. This fundamental misinterpretation is the very engine that created the persistent link between the Amazons and cities of gold. The Spanish arrived in the Americas pre-programmed with two powerful ideas: the classical myth of a wealthy, all-female society and their own burning desire for instant riches. When they then encountered indigenous cultures that used gold in stunning, sacred ways, their minds made a connection that simply wasn't there. They took the spiritual gold of the Americas and welded it onto the mythological Amazons of Europe. A story about a powerful tribe of women was instantly upgraded in the telling to a story about a powerful tribe of rich women, guardians of golden cities. Every report of a chieftain adorned with a golden pectoral became evidence of El Dorado. Every tale of a female shaman or a matrilineal tradition was twisted into proof of Amazonian rule. The two legends fused into a single, irresistible fantasy that somewhere in the green heart of the continent, a civilization of warrior women sat upon a fortune in gleaming gold, just waiting to be found. It was a fiction born from a perfect storm of cultural ignorance and insatiable greed, a misunderstanding that would shape the exploration of a continent and forever alter the myth of the Amazons. To truly understand the legend of the Amazons, we must return to the ancient texts that first gave them life, approaching these accounts not as straightforward history, but as a complex tapestry woven from threads of observation, rumor, and profound cultural bias. The Greek and Roman writers who documented these warrior women were not modern anthropologists. They were storytellers, historians, and propagandists, often working with second-hand information and filtering it through a worldview that saw their own civilization as the pinnacle of human achievement. This makes our task one of careful literary archaeology, sifting through their words to separate plausible facts from symbolic fiction. The figure who stands tallest in this endeavor is Herodotus, often called the father of history. His work is a fascinating and at times frustrating blend of what we would now recognize as genuine ethnographic inquiry and the uncritical repetition of popular folklore. He writes of the Amazons with a sense of investigation, claiming to report the customs of the Sarmatians, a culture where women rode horses, hunted, and went to war alongside men. He even provides a detailed origin story, describing how a group of Amazons intermarried with Scythian men to create this new society. This account feels remarkably specific, and for a long time it was dismissed as pure myth. Yet, as we've seen with the archaeological evidence from Scythian kurgans, Herodotus appears to have been recording a distorted version of a verifiable reality. His reports of warrior women were likely based on genuine encounters or stories from Greek colonists living around the Black Sea, who had direct contact with these nomadic steppe cultures. Where his account likely veers into embellishment is in the details. The idea that these women lived completely apart from men or that their society was a pure matriarchy. This feels more like a Greek narrative imposition, a way to make a fascinating cultural difference fit into a more extreme and thrilling mythological framework. This process of cultural translation is vividly evident in Greek art. From the 5th century BCE onwards, depictions of Amazons or Amazonomachs became a popular theme on pottery, sculptures, and temple friezes. These scenes almost always show the Amazons in fierce combat with Greek heroes like Heracles or Achilles. What is truly revealing is their attire and weaponry. The Amazons in these artworks are almost never depicted in Greek hoplite armor. Instead, they are shown wearing patterned trousers, pointed caps, and wielding distinctive crescent-shaped shields and axes, a precise match for the equipment used by Scythian archers and cavalrymen. This is a powerful correlation. It strongly suggests that Greek artists were using real Scythian warriors as their models, simply changing the gender to create the familiar enemy. The message was clear. The ultimate threat to Greek civilization was not a foreign man, but a foreign woman who had taken on the masculine role of warrior, thereby inverting the natural order. The art served as a form of propaganda, reinforcing Greek cultural superiority by showing their heroes triumphing over this terrifying other. So where does the City of Gold enter this picture? The answer is it doesn't, at least not in these early classical sources. The ancient Greek texts describe the Amazons as a people, a tribe, a nation, but they are consistently portrayed as nomads or inhabitants of modest settlements, not as the rulers of a vast, glittering urban empire. Their wealth is in their horses, their freedom, and their martial skill, not in hoards of precious metal. The concept of the Golden City is a much later invention, a colonial fantasy that was grafted onto the ancient myth centuries after Herodotus. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the Americas, they were driven by an insatiable lust for gold and a fervent belief in the existence of El Dorado. They carried with them the classical education of Renaissance Europe, which included the legends of the Amazons. Upon hearing reports of powerful female figures or matrilineal traditions from indigenous peoples, their minds immediately made a connection that simply wasn't there in the original texts. They combined their own avaricious goals with the pre-existing myth, creating a new, supercharged legend. The Amazons were not just warriors, but the guardians of unimaginable wealth. The Golden City was the ultimate colonial prize, a justification for the brutal exploitation of a continent. It was a profound cultural misunderstanding, taking a Greek story about powerful women and transforming it into a Spanish story about rich women, thereby twisting an ancient myth into a new and deadly reality for the people of the Americas. The narratives of individual Amazon queens are where the legend truly comes to life, transforming an entire civilization into a story about powerful, unforgettable leaders. Figures like Hippolyta and Penthesilea weren't just anonymous warriors. They were complex monarchs whose stories were deeply intertwined with the fates of the greatest Greek heroes, adding a layer of personal drama and tragic grandeur to the myth. Queen Hippolyta's story is centered on her magical girdle, a belt given to her by her father, Ares, the god of war. This wasn't merely an accessory, it was a profound symbol of her royal authority and her divine right to rule. The labor of Heracles to retrieve this girdle pits the ultimate Greek male hero against the ultimate foreign female ruler in a clash that is loaded with political and cultural meaning. Some versions of the myth even suggest a romantic tension, with Heracles and Hippolyta forming a genuine connection before a tragic misunderstanding leads to violence. This complexity makes her more than a simple antagonist. She is a respected sovereign whose power is so significant that its theft becomes one of the defining tasks of Greece's greatest hero. Then there is Penthesilea, the tragic queen whose story is etched into the final days of the Trojan War. Driven by a desire for glory or, in some tellings, by the guilt of having accidentally killed her sister, she leads her contingent of Amazons to aid the faltering Trojans. Her confrontation with Achilles on the battlefield is one of the most poignant moments in the epic cycle. In the heat of combat, Achilles delivers a fatal blow, but as he removes her helmet, he is immediately struck by her valor and beauty, overcome with a deep and sudden remorse. This moment of tragic recognition elevates Penthesilea from a faceless enemy to a peer, a worthy adversary whose death is mourned even by the man who killed her. These nuanced portrayals suggest a certain Greek fascination with, and even respect for, these formidable female leaders. They were not simply monsters to be slain, they were noble opponents, and their defeats were often framed as glorious but profoundly sad events. This mythological theme of powerful, autonomous queens finds a startling echo in the archaeological record, particularly among the Sarmatian tribes, the supposed descendants of the Amazons according to Herodotus. Excavations of Sarmatian kurgans have revealed a society where women could achieve the highest echelons of status. We find the graves of women buried with incredible wealth and clear symbols of leadership, elaborate headdresses, fine jewelry, and ceremonial vessels. Most significantly, some of these high-status female burials include weapons. An analysis of their remains often reveals the telltale marks of a life spent on horseback and the brutal injuries sustained in combat. This evidence paints a picture of a culture where a woman could be both a political leader and a military commander, a reality that would have been unthinkable in ancient Athens or Sparta. These women were not mythical constructs, they were real chieftains, priestesses, and warriors who held genuine power on the steppes. The consistent depiction of these queens in Greek art and story did more than just provide compelling characters. It fundamentally reinforced the idea of the Amazons as a coherent, organized state. A people requires a capital, a queen requires a throne. The narratives implicitly suggested a centralized power structure, a homeland, and a seat of government, all the necessary components of a civilization that could be lost. This idea of a capital city, a central place of power and wealth, is the crucial link that transformed the Amazon legend from a tale about a nomadic tribe into a quest for a lost city. If there was a Queen Hippolyta, then there must have been a city from which she ruled. If she possessed a girdle of divine power, then her city must have been a place of immense spiritual and material wealth. This logical leap from a people to a polity is what fueled the dreams of explorers for centuries, sending them into the depths of the Eurasian steppes and the Amazon rainforest, not just to find a culture, but to discover a specific, legendary place, the capital of the Amazons, the ultimate lost city of powerful women. The queens, therefore, are the key that unlocked the door to the Golden City myth, giving the legend a focal point and a destination for all those who dared to search. The fascination with these warrior women did not remain confined to ancient texts or dusty academic journals. It exploded into the broader cultural consciousness, finding a powerful and enduring life in art, literature, and eventually every form of modern media. This journey of the Amazon myth, from painted pottery to the silver screen, reveals just as much about the societies retelling the story as it does about the legend itself, often trading historical nuance for symbolic power and spectacular fantasy. One of the earliest and most persistent forms of this storytelling is found on ancient Greek vases, where scenes of battle between Greek heroes and Amazons known as Amazonomachs were incredibly popular. These were not meant to be historical documents, they were potent political propaganda. By depicting the civilized male Greek warriors triumphing over the chaotic feminine forces of the Amazon, these artworks reinforced the social order of city-states like Athens, where women held very limited public roles. The Amazons were consistently shown as beautiful, powerful, and noble, but ultimately defeated, providing a safe way to explore the allure and perceived danger of female autonomy while still affirming the dominance of the patriarchal status quo. This classical imagery laid a foundation that would be built upon for centuries. During the Renaissance, as Europeans rediscovered Greek and Roman texts, the Amazons were revived in painting and sculpture, often romanticized as exotic figures from a lost world. The Victorian era saw a particular fascination with the theme, though often filtered through a lens of colonial curiosity and rigid gender norms. The real transformation, however, came in the 20th century with the birth of a new form of popular mythology, the comic book. In 1941, psychologist William Moulton Marston, under the pen name Charles Moulton, introduced the world to Wonder Woman. Inspired by the Amazon legends and the suffragist movement, Marston created Princess Diana of the Themyscira, a superheroine who was both immensely powerful and deeply compassionate. Her hidden island homeland, the Themyscira, became the modern world's most famous incarnation of the Amazonian Golden City, a technologically advanced, breathtakingly beautiful utopia, isolated from the corrupt world of men and dedicated to peace and justice. The massive success of Wonder Woman and the subsequent blockbuster films have cemented this image in the global imagination. The Themyscira, with its gleaming white temples and sun-drenched shores, is a direct descendant of the conquistadors' fantasies of white cities, now fully realized with a Hollywood budget. This portrayal, while empowering and visually stunning, overwhelmingly emphasizes the fantastical and exotic elements. The gritty reality of nomadic Scythian horse archers is replaced by a society of superhuman demigoddesses in ornate armor, their story focused on super-powered heroics rather than historical plausibility. This is not a criticism but an observation of how myths evolve. They are polished and reshaped to meet the needs and desires of a new audience. The modern Amazon is less a historical figure to be understood and more an icon of female strength to be celebrated. This cultural repackaging has a profound effect on the public's perception of the historical truth. For many, their entire understanding of the Amazons begins and ends with the pop culture version. The complex archaeological discoveries in the steppes seem almost mundane in comparison to the thrilling spectacle of a CGI Themyscira. The legend's connection to the Dorado myth is often completely overshadowed by the simpler, more satisfying narrative of a hidden island paradise. Yet, this ongoing fascination is also what keeps the academic search alive. The public's hunger for stories about powerful warrior women, stoked by films and comics, generates interest and funding for real-world research. Every new blockbuster creates a new wave of enthusiasts who might then seek out documentaries or articles about the Scythian remains, ensuring that the dialogue between myth and history continues. The Golden City may have shifted from a destination on a map to a setting in a comic book, but its power to captivate and inspire exploration both of the world and of our own potential remains as potent as ever. The relentless pursuit of a golden city hidden within the Amazon, a dream supercharged by the melding of conquistador greed and indigenous legend, did not fade with the age of exploration. It evolved, transforming from a military campaign for Spain's glory into a deeply personal obsession for a new breed of adventurer, armed not with crossbows but with compasses and a fervent belief in their own scholarly theories. No figure embodies this modern, tragic quest more than Lieutenant Colonel Percy Harrison Fawcett, whose disappearance in 1925 became the stuff of its own enduring legend. Fawcett was a seasoned explorer, a man hardened by years of mapping hostile borders for Britain's Royal Geographical Society. He wasn't chasing mere rumor, he was driven by a conviction pieced together from old Portuguese manuscripts, indigenous stories, and his own observations that a sophisticated, ancient civilization, which he called simply the Lost City of Z, had once thrived in the uncharted depths of the Brazilian Amazon. He imagined not a city of literal gold, but a cradle of advanced culture, a discovery that would rewrite history and earn him immortal fame. His final expedition, launched with his son Jack and his son's friend Rolly Rymel, was his ultimate gambit. They vanished without a trace, swallowed by the same green silence that had consumed so many before them, sparking over a century of speculation and numerous fatal rescue missions aimed at finding the man who was himself searching for a myth. Fawcett's quest, though the most famous, was just one thread in a larger tapestry of 20th century exploration still captivated by the Amazon's secrets. Decades later, figures like the American botanist Dr. Lauren McIntyre would find themselves drawn into similarly enigmatic territory. While mapping the remote Javari River basin in the 1970s, McIntyre made first contact with the elusive Maoruna people, whom many outsiders called the cat people for their facial adornments. His harrowing account of being led by the tribe on a mysterious pilgrimage to a sacred mountain, a journey he believed was connected to a profound spiritual seeking of their mythical origins, echoes the same powerful allure of a hidden truth buried in the rainforest. His experiences, later popularized in books and film, underscored that the search was no longer just for gold or even ruined cities, but for meaning, for connection to an ancient wisdom that the modern world had lost. These modern expeditions, for all their romance, were built upon a foundation of often brutal historical exploitation. The original Spanish quests were never just journeys of discovery. They were engines of conquest that left a devastating legacy. The relentless search for El Dorado and the Amazons provided the ideological justification for the subjugation and enslavement of countless indigenous peoples. Tribes were forced to serve as porters for expeditions that often ended in their own starvation, or were tortured into revealing the location of treasures that, in their worldview, never existed in the form the Europeans imagined. The diseases brought by these outsiders, smallpox, influenza, measles, raced ahead of the explorers themselves, silently decimating the very populations that might have built the complex societies the conquistadors later thought they glimpsed. The tragic irony is stark. The Europeans were likely wandering through the recently abandoned ruins of a collapsed world, their presence ensuring it could never be rebuilt or understood. This cycle of quest and tragedy highlights the dark underbelly of the legend, revealing how a captivating story can be weaponized, causing irreparable harm to the very cultures it claims to seek. What ultimately emerges from this long history of exploration is a profound and complex portrait of human ambition. The quest for the Amazons and their golden city was never a single thing. It was a shape-shifting dream reflecting the deepest desires and darkest impulses of each era. For the Spanish, it was about divine right and material wealth, a tangible prize to fuel an empire. For Victorian and 20th century adventurers like Fawcett, it became a scholarly and personal crusade, a test of manhood and a chance for eternal legacy in the annals of discovery. For the indigenous peoples of the Americas, it was often a catastrophic encounter with a destructive, incomprehensible force, a nightmare brought on by a story they never told. This relentless drive to find what might not even exist fundamentally shaped our geographical and cultural understanding of the Amazon, filling in blank spaces on the map even as it created new ones in our historical consciousness. The legend proved to be more powerful than any single city, driving centuries of exploration and leaving behind a trail of both stunning discovery and profound human cost, a testament to our enduring need to believe that something wondrous still lies hidden just beyond the next bend in the river. For centuries, the search for the Amazons and their golden cities has been a story told through a European lens, driven by the dreams and greed of outsiders. But what of the people who have actually called the Amazon home for thousands of years? Their voices, their stories, and their own rich histories have been largely ignored, overshadowed by the relentless pursuit of a myth that was never theirs. To truly understand the legend, we must finally listen to the indigenous cultures of the rainforest, not as sources of clues for a treasure hunt, but as the rightful keepers of their own profound narratives. Across the vastness of the Amazon basin, numerous tribes possess oral traditions that speak of powerful female figures, but these stories exist within a completely different cultural context than the Greek myth. The Kayapo people, for instance, tell of a time when women were the primary hunters and warriors, a period that ended with a great social transformation that redefined gender roles. Other groups recount legends of female spirit beings or ancestors who were fierce protectors of the forest. These are not tales of a separate, man-hating society, but rather stories woven into the complex spiritual and social fabric of their communities, speaking to the balance of power between men and women and their shared relationship with the natural world. The tragic history of this quest is one of constant misinterpretation and appropriation. When conquistadors like Orellana heard fragments of these indigenous stories, they immediately forced them into the familiar box of their own classical education. A tale about a female forest spirit became a sighting of an Amazon warrior, a description of a matrilineal society where inheritance is traced through the mother's line was taken as proof of a matriarchal army. This wasn't just a simple misunderstanding, it was a form of cultural violence. It stripped these rich, nuanced traditions of their true meaning and repurposed them as waypoints on a European treasure map. This pattern of exploitation continued for centuries, with explorers and archaeologists often arriving in indigenous territories to extract information and artifacts, with little regard for the people themselves or the sanctity of their knowledge. The damage inflicted by these myth-driven expeditions is incalculable. They introduced diseases that decimated populations, they disrupted social structures, and they fueled a narrative of the Amazon as a place of mystery to be solved by outsiders, rather than a living homeland with its own deep history and wisdom. Today, a new and more respectful chapter is being written, one that moves beyond the Golden City narrative to collaborate with indigenous communities. Modern archaeologists are increasingly working side by side with tribal elders and trackers, recognizing that their oral histories are not mere folklore but invaluable records of the past. For example, in the Xingu region of Brazil, researchers partnered with the Cuicuro people, whose stories of a great village their ancestors inhabited directly guided archaeologists to the discovery of Cuicugu's extensive earthworks and road systems. This partnership is transformative. The Cuicuro don't see these ruins as a lost city. They see them as the home of their grandparents, a tangible connection to their own heritage. This collaborative model prioritizes respect and shared understanding, allowing science to be guided by indigenous knowledge rather than exploiting it. This shift in approach is helping to uncover the true richness of Amazonian cultures, which is far more impressive than any fictional city of gold. We are learning that these societies developed incredibly sophisticated ways of managing the rainforest, from engineering the unbelievably fertile terra preta soil to creating complex agroforestry systems that look like wild jungle but are actually carefully cultivated gardens of valuable food and medicinal plants. Their spiritual worldviews, deeply connected to the rivers, animals, and plants, represent a profound understanding of ecology that the modern world is only beginning to appreciate. The real treasure of the Amazon was never a hoard of shiny metal. It is the enduring knowledge and resilience of its people who have thrived in this environment for millennia. By centering indigenous perspectives, we are not debunking a legend so much as replacing a shallow fantasy with a much deeper, more human, and truly awe-inspiring reality. To truly grasp why the Amazon has guarded its secrets for so long, we must understand the sheer, overwhelming power of its environment, a force so immense it actively conspires to erase history. This isn't a landscape that gently cradles the remnants of the past. It is a voracious, living entity that consumes them. The first and most obvious challenge is the vegetation itself. The rainforest is a multi-layered fortress with a canopy so dense it blots out the sun, creating a perpetual twilight on the forest floor below. Beneath this green ceiling lies a tangled web of roots, vines, and undergrowth that can swallow a stone wall in a matter of years. What might take a desert environment millennia to bury, the Amazon jungle can conceal in a single human lifetime. Any structure not constantly maintained is swiftly dismantled by nature's relentless reclamation project, leaving behind not dramatic stone ruins like those of the Maya or Inca, but mere subtle mounds and discolored earth easily mistaken for natural formations. Compounding this is the rhythm of the water. The Amazon basin is a pulsing, aquatic world where river levels can rise and fall by over 40 feet between the wet and dry seasons. Vast stretches of forest flood for months on end, turning solid ground into a navigable waterway and then back again. This annual inundation doesn't just hide sites, it actively churns the soil, washing away artifacts and blurring the lines of human construction into the natural sediment. For an archaeologist used to digging in dry, stable earth, this is a nightmare scenario. The very soil presents another profound obstacle. For generations, the conventional wisdom was that the Amazon's terra firma, its upland forest soil, was notoriously poor in nutrients, far too infertile to support the intensive agriculture required for large, permanent cities. This belief in the pristine myth that the rainforest was a near-empty wilderness only capable of sustaining small, nomadic tribes became a self-fulfilling prophecy. It deterred serious archaeological investment for decades as scholars asked, why look for something that, according to ecological theory, could never have existed there in the first place? This long-held perception has been utterly shattered by one of the most revolutionary tools in modern archaeology, LIDAR technology. Light detection and ranging allows researchers to digitally strip away the entire forest canopy from an aerial survey, creating a stunningly detailed three-dimensional map of the ground beneath. What these laser pulses have revealed across Brazil and Bolivia is nothing short of a paradigm shift. They have exposed the ghostly outlines of massive geometric earthworks, perfect circles, squares, and octagons carved deep into the earth on a scale impossible to perceive from the ground. They have traced the lines of wide, raised causeways that connected settlements across dozens of miles, and identified the remnants of sophisticated bridges, moats, and defensive ditches. These aren't the traces of simple villages. They are the fingerprints of a complex, organized society that engineered its landscape on a staggering scale, capable of coordinated labor that would have supported populations numbering in the tens of thousands. This new evidence forces us to reconsider not just where people lived, but how they thrived. The key lies in the mysterious terra preta, or dark earth. This is not natural soil, it is a human-made super soil, intentionally created by these ancient peoples through a process of adding charcoal, broken pottery, compost, and manure to the naturally infertile ground. This incredible biochar technology locks in nutrients and creates a rich, fertile land that remains productive for centuries. The presence of vast expanses of terra preta across the basin is the clearest possible evidence of large, sedentary populations who weren't just surviving in the Amazon. They were actively improving it, managing its resources with a sophistication we are only beginning to understand. So why, then, did the legend of a golden city persist in the face of such an environment? The very hostility of the rainforest is the very thing that fed the myth. For European explorers, the impenetrable jungle was not just a physical barrier, it was a canvas for their deepest desires and fears. Its vast, uncharted spaces became the perfect hiding place for anything the imagination could conjure, from giants and headless men to a civilization of wealthy warrior women. The difficulty of exploration meant that disproof was nearly impossible. Every expedition that failed to find a city could simply conclude that they had not looked hard enough or had been searching in the wrong part of the immense wilderness. The legend was perpetually validated by its own elusiveness. Furthermore, the environmental factors that contributed to the collapse of these societies, likely a combination of climate shifts and the introduced diseases that raced ahead of the explorers, meant that the conquistadors were often traversing a recently emptied world. They were walking through the overgrown ruins of a collapsed civilization, interpreting the fading memory of its grandeur through the distorting lens of their own greed, forever convinced that the golden prize lay just beyond the next flooded forest or tangled river bend. At its core, the enduring power of the Amazon myth isn't rooted in historical fact, but in profound psychological symbolism. For the ancient Greeks who first gave these warrior women a name, they represented a terrifying and fascinating inversion of their own social order. In the patriarchal world of city-states like Athens, where women were largely confined to the private sphere, the idea of a society where women held all political and military power was the ultimate nightmare and fantasy. The Amazons became the perfect other, a symbolic boundary against which Greek men could define their own civilized identity. By portraying their greatest heroes defeating these powerful women, Greek art and literature delivered a potent message. This inversion of the natural order is a threat we have conquered. The myth served as a cultural safety valve, allowing society to explore its deep-seated anxieties about female autonomy and power in a controlled, narrative form, always concluding with the reassertion of patriarchal control. This symbolic function seamlessly merged with the equally potent legend of golden cities. If the Amazons represented a fearsome social inversion, then their mythical cities of gold represented an unattainable material and spiritual paradise. This concept taps into a universal human yearning for a lost golden age, a place of perfect abundance and ease that exists just beyond our reach. For the Spanish conquistadors, this wasn't merely a story, it was a physical destination that justified immense suffering and brutality. El Dorado was the ultimate prize, a symbol of divine favor and limitless wealth that promised to elevate its discoverer from a mere mortal to a legend. The fusion of these two symbols created an irresistibly potent narrative, the most formidable guardians protecting the most desirable prize. This combination spoke directly to the deepest layers of ambition, fear, and desire. The evolution of these symbols through history acts as a mirror, reflecting the changing anxieties and aspirations of each era. During the Victorian Age, a period of rigid gender roles and colonial expansion, the Amazon myth was often reinterpreted through a lens of exoticism and titillation, emphasizing their supposed barbaric beauty as a contrast to proper European womanhood. In the 20th century, the Golden City transformed from a literal place of wealth into a metaphorical one. For a disillusioned modern world, it became a symbol of a pure, uncorrupted utopia, a sanctuary from the complexities and failings of contemporary society. This is vividly captured in the comic book reimagining of them Asera, Wonder Woman's island home, which is less a fortress of gold and more a paradise of peace and advanced wisdom, reflecting a modern desire for a holistic escape rather than mere material riches. The psychological appeal of these myths remains potent because they speak to fundamental, unchanging aspects of human nature. The allure of the hidden treasure taps into our innate curiosity and our drive for discovery, the same impulse that pushes scientists, explorers, and entrepreneurs to venture into the unknown. The fascination with powerful, mysterious women connects to our complex relationships with authority, gender, and the untamed aspects of our own psyche that society often asks us to suppress. These stories provide a framework to explore the boundaries of power, the meaning of civilization, and the very nature of desire itself. They allow us to safely confront what we fear and passionately pursue what we crave, all within the safe container of a tale that is, as the saying goes, somewhere between legend and history. This is why we are still searching, still making movies, and still debating, not because we expect to find a city of gold, but because the journey toward it helps us understand something essential about ourselves. Yet for all the power of this psychological appeal, the legend remains shrouded in a set of stubborn misconceptions that often obscure the far more fascinating truth. One of the most persistent myths is the notion that the Amazons were a complete fiction, a fantastical invention dreamed up by Greek poets with no connection to reality. As we've journeyed through the archaeological evidence from the Eurasian steppes, this idea simply doesn't hold. The discovery of Scythian and Sarmatian women buried with their weapons, their bodies bearing the marks of combat and a life on horseback, provides undeniable proof that the Greeks were likely inspired by real, formidable women they had encountered or heard tales of through trade. These were not a society that lived entirely without men, as the purest form of the myth suggests, but their culture clearly allowed for women to occupy roles of warrior status and authority that would have been unthinkable in the Mediterranean world. The myth was an exaggeration, a dramatic retelling, but it was not a creation from nothing. Equally pervasive is the literal interpretation of the City of Gold. Popular imagination, fueled by countless adventure films and novels, conjures images of vast urban landscapes where every building, street, and tower is constructed from solid, shimmering gold. This vision, while captivating, fundamentally misunderstands both the nature of the legend and the reality of pre-Columbian metallurgy. No archaeological evidence anywhere in the world supports the existence of a city built from gold. For the indigenous cultures of the Americas, as we've discussed, gold held immense spiritual and symbolic value, but it was a decorative and ceremonial material, not a structural one. They created breathtaking pectorals, ornate masks, and ritual objects of incredible artistry, but they did not build houses with it. The Spanish conquistadors, blinded by their own avarice, took the metaphorical concept of a golden city, a place of immense spiritual wealth and power, and interpreted it in the most literal, materialistic way possible. This misconception cost countless lives and continues to shape a flawed perception of what these civilizations actually valued. The role of popular culture in cementing these ideas cannot be overstated. From the gleaming island of them Asera in the Wonder Woman franchise to the golden temples of El Dorado in animated adventures, modern media overwhelmingly favors the spectacular over the subtle. These portrayals are thrilling and empowering in their own right, but they often skip the complex historical and archaeological context, presenting a simplified, fantastical version that becomes the default understanding for millions. This creates a feedback loop where the public expects a certain kind of story, and creators in turn deliver it, leaving the nuanced reality of warrior women and advanced earthwork societies in the shadows. The real Amazons weren't superhuman demigoddesses in ornate armor. They were likely tough, highly skilled nomadic horse archers whose way of life challenged Greek societal norms. Their cities weren't made of metal, but were perhaps sophisticated settlements of wood and earth that have been reclaimed by the relentless jungle. This is where critical thinking becomes our most valuable tool. Engaging with historical mysteries like this one requires us to hold two ideas in our minds at once. We can absolutely marvel at the power of the myth, appreciating its enduring symbolism and its ability to inspire art and exploration across centuries. Simultaneously, we can interrogate it with the tools of evidence, separating the likely kernels of truth from the layers of exaggeration and cultural projection. It asks us to consider the source. Was a conquistador's account meant to secure funding from a king, or was it an objective field report? It asks us to look at the motivations behind a Greek vase painting. Was it historical documentation, or was it political propaganda designed to reinforce social order? By asking these questions, we do not diminish the legend, we enrich it. We replace a shallow, fictionalized treasure hunt with a profound human story about how cultures interact, how stories evolve, and how our deepest fears and desires can shape our understanding of the world, sometimes leading us to project our own fantasies onto the map, forever searching for a golden glint that was, in the end, only ever a reflection. The legend of the Amazons has undergone a remarkable transformation, evolving from a myth used to define patriarchal boundaries into a powerful, global symbol of female strength and autonomy. No longer just a cautionary tale from ancient Greece, the archetype of the warrior woman has been reclaimed and reinterpreted, becoming a potent icon for feminist thought and a source of inspiration across modern media and social movements. This shift reflects a profound change in how we engage with these stories, moving from a lens of fear and otherness to one of recognition and empowerment. The narrative is no longer about powerful women being conquered, but about their inherent strength being celebrated and emulated. We see this reclamation vividly in the world of comics and blockbuster films. Wonder Woman's journey from the pages of DC Comics to the forefront of popular culture is perhaps the most direct link. Her creators explicitly drew upon the Amazon mythos, not to portray her as a terrifying outsider, but as a compassionate yet formidable champion of justice. Themyscira is presented not as a threatening anomaly, but as a utopian ideal, a society that thrives on wisdom and peace precisely because it is free from patriarchal influence. This representation offers a compelling counter-narrative to the ancient Greek perspective, arguing that a world led by women isn't one of chaos, but one of potential balance and greater harmony. Beyond the silver screen, the spirit of the Amazon resonates deeply within modern social and political movements. The image of the warrior woman has been adopted as a symbol of resistance and resilience. Protesters have donned Amazonian imagery to fight for gender equality, environmental protection, and social justice, embodying the fierce protectiveness the myth represents. This is not about literal warfare, but about the courage to defend one's community and beliefs. In this sense, the archetype connects to real-life Amazons everywhere, from human rights activists facing down oppression to scientists battling a pandemic, and to the countless women who demonstrate extraordinary strength in their daily lives, leading their families, companies, and countries with determination and grit. The legend also prompts a crucial re-examination of history itself, fueling the quest to uncover the suppressed stories of powerful women that traditional narratives have overlooked. The archaeological discoveries of Scythian warrior burials have been met with excitement not just for their historical value, but for their cultural resonance. They provide tangible proof that challenges centuries of assumptions about gender roles, suggesting that the division between masculine and feminine spheres is not a biological imperative but a cultural construct. This evidence empowers a new generation of scholars and enthusiasts to ask different questions of the past, to look for the women who led, fought, and ruled, and to finally integrate their stories into our understanding of human history. Ultimately, the most enduring legacy of the Amazons may not be a hidden city of gold, but a golden thread of inspiration that connects the past to the present. The myth endures because it speaks to a universal human potential for strength, courage, and leadership that exists regardless of gender. It encourages everyone to tap into their own inner warrior, to defend what is right and to challenge unjust systems. While we may never find Hippolyta's girdle or a metropolis paved with gold, we find something far more valuable every day: the living, breathing embodiment of the Amazon spirit in the fierce and compassionate actions of women around the world, proving that the truest treasure was never a place, but the enduring power of the human spirit to redefine its own legends. If ancient myths are the soul of this mystery, and historical accounts are its bones, then modern technology provides the visionary eyes that allow us to see the complete picture for the very first time. The romantic image of an archaeologist with a trowel and brush will always have its place, but the real revolution in our understanding of the Amazon is happening far above the jungle canopy, with tools that feel more at home in a science fiction novel than an Indiana Jones adventure. We are no longer just scratching at the surface. We are using advanced sensing technologies to peel back the layers of time and vegetation, revealing a hidden human history written into the very earth of the rainforest on a scale we never thought possible. The undisputed champion of this new era is LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. Imagine having the power to command every single tree, vine, and leaf in the Amazon to instantly vanish, leaving behind a perfectly detailed, three-dimensional map of the naked ground beneath. That is the breathtaking capability of LiDAR. Mounted on aircraft or drones, these systems fire millions of laser pulses per second at the ground. By meticulously measuring the minute differences in how long each pulse takes to bounce back from the canopy, the understory, and finally the solid earth, a powerful computer can digitally strip away the entire forest, revealing the subtle, human-made contours of the terrain that have been completely invisible for centuries. This technology has turned the entire Amazon basin into a vast archaeological site, transforming our perception of the region from a pristine wilderness into a deeply engineered landscape. What these laser eyes have revealed is nothing short of a paradigm shift, forcing a complete rewrite of Amazonian history. Across Brazil and Bolivia, LiDAR scans have uncovered the ghostly outlines of enormous geometric earthworks known as geoglyphs, perfect circles, squares, and octagons carved deep into the soil, some spanning hundreds of meters across. These aren't random formations, they are ceremonial and public spaces, laid out with a precision that speaks of sophisticated astronomical knowledge and social organization. Even more compelling are the traces of extensive, straight roadways that connected settlements across dozens of miles, weaving through the forest in a way that would be impossible to detect from the ground. We see the remnants of complex moats, defensive ditches, and raised platforms that once supported entire villages. These discoveries collectively point to a reality that shatters the old, pristine myth. The Amazon was not an empty green desert, but a managed, populated, and organized world, capable of supporting large, interconnected societies that numbered in the tens of thousands. But LiDAR is not the only tool reshaping this search. Satellite imagery, particularly high-resolution multispectral analysis, allows scientists to identify subtle changes in vegetation health that betray what lies beneath. Certain types of plants growing over ancient ditches or walls will appear differently from those growing on undisturbed land, allowing archaeologists to map entire networks of settlements from orbit. On the ground, tools like ground-penetrating radar can then be used to investigate these anomalies without ever breaking the soil, sending radio waves into the earth to create a sonogram of buried structures, revealing the outlines of ancient plazas, homes, and hearths. This non-invasive approach is not only more efficient, it is deeply respectful, preserving the integrity of sacred sites and allowing researchers to learn from the landscape without destroying it. The most profound implication of these technological advances is how they validate the oldest stories. The early Spanish accounts, like the one from Friar Carvajal, spoke of encountering large, prosperous villages, networks of roads, and white cities gleaming on the riverbanks. For hundreds of years, historians dismissed these descriptions as the fantastical exaggerations of desperate men. Now, technology suggests they may have been reporting what they actually saw. The populations that built these earthworks were likely decimated by European diseases like smallpox, which spread ahead of the explorers themselves. The empty jungle the conquistadors struggled through was in fact a recently collapsed world, a society felled by an invisible enemy before the first European ever laid eyes on it. The technology isn't just finding new things, it is corroborating ancient testimonies, forcing us to read those old texts with a new humility and understanding. While these tools have yet to reveal a single city made of solid gold, they are uncovering a different kind of treasure, a golden age of human achievement in the Amazon, a civilization of earth and ingenuity that mastered its environment in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. Yet the driving force behind this centuries-long quest was never purely about academic curiosity or a simple love of adventure. It was fueled by the far more potent engines of economic ambition and political strategy. The legend of the Amazons and their golden cities provided a perfect, glittering pretext for colonial expansion, transforming a mythological notion into a powerful tool for empire. For the Spanish crown, financing risky expeditions into the uncharted interior was a colossal gamble. The potential return on investment, however, was too alluring to ignore. A successful conquistador could secure vast new territories, claim unimaginable wealth in gold and resources, and convert thousands of souls to Christianity, all in one fell swoop. The myth of El Dorado and its Amazonian guardians served as the ultimate prospectus, a story so compelling it could open the royal treasury. Men like Francisco de Orellana and Gonzalo Pizarro were not just explorers, they were corporate executives of their day, leading state-sanctioned ventures where the promise of lootable wealth justified immense human and financial cost. Their reports back to Europe, filled with tales of warrior women and gleaming cities, were less about ethnographic accuracy and more about securing the next round of funding, ensuring the machine of conquest kept grinding forward. This narrative was meticulously crafted to serve a political purpose, painting the brutal subjugation of indigenous peoples and the plunder of their lands as a heroic, almost divine mission to civilize a wild continent and claim its hidden treasures for God and King. This exploitation did not end with the age of galleons and conquistadors. It simply evolved, finding new forms in the modern era. Today, the legend continues to have profound economic and political ramifications across Amazonian nations. The promise of hidden ruins and lost civilizations is a powerful magnet for tourism, a major industry for countries like Brazil, Peru, and Ecuador. Local governments and tour operators often leverage the mystery, promoting expeditions and adventures that allow visitors to feel like modern-day explorers tracing the steps of Percy Fawcett. This can bring vital revenue to remote regions, but it also raises significant ethical questions. The surge in ecotourism and adventure travel must be carefully managed to avoid damaging the very ecosystems and cultural sites people come to see. Furthermore, the enduring myth can directly influence academic and scientific funding. A proposal to search for a lost city is far more likely to capture public imagination and attract private investment or grants than one aimed at studying soil samples or tribal ethnography, potentially skewing research priorities toward the sensational. Perhaps the most damaging modern consequence lies in the realm of resource extraction. The same regions mythologized as the home of El Dorado are often rich in very real, very tangible resources: oil, gas, timber, and minerals. The historical narrative of a land waiting to be exploited for its riches continues to inform government policies and corporate strategies. Mining and logging companies, sometimes with state backing, push deeper into protected areas and indigenous territories, their actions justified by a rhetoric of economic development and national progress that eerily echoes the justifications of the old conquistadors. The legend, stripped of its romantic sheen, becomes a persistent subconscious script that the rainforest is a place to be entered, conquered, and drained of its value rather than understood and preserved. This relentless pursuit has dire consequences for the true guardians of the Amazon, its indigenous inhabitants. For centuries, their lives and cultures have been collateral damage in the search for a fictional prize. Their ancestral stories were taken from them, misinterpreted, and weaponized to draw invaders into their homelands. Today, the continued intrusion of miners, loggers, and even well-meaning but poorly regulated tourists threatens their land, their health, and their very way of life. Diseases to which they have no immunity are introduced, their water sources are polluted by mining runoff, and their hunting grounds are destroyed by deforestation. The myth of a golden city creates a pervasive disregard for the actual golden knowledge these cultures possess. Their profound understanding of the forest's medicinal plants, their sustainable agricultural practices, and their spiritual connection to an ecosystem they have nurtured for millennia. The most tragic irony is that the outside world remains so fixated on a fantasy of lost gold that it risks destroying the living, breathing treasure that has been here all along. The legend, therefore, is far more than a story. It is an active, often destructive force, a testament to how a powerful narrative, once unleashed, can shape economies, drive politics, and alter the fate of continents and their peoples for centuries. What these stories share is a powerful, almost primal allure for a hidden paradise, a perfect world secluded from the flaws and struggles of our own. The fabled utopia of Shangri-La, imagined in James Hilton's novel, Lost Horizon, offers a sanctuary of peace and wisdom, hidden away in the remote Himalayas where people live in harmony and never grow old. Similarly, the myth of Atlantis, first described by Plato, tells of a technologically advanced island civilization that sank beneath the waves in a single day and night, a cautionary tale about a society that reached the pinnacle of power only to be punished for its hubris. Then there are the 7 cities of gold, or Cibola, a legend that drove Spanish exploration across North America, promising not 1 but 7 metropolises overflowing with treasure. Each of these myths, in its own way, presents a world that is isolated, incredibly wealthy, and in some way more perfect than our own, acting as a mirror that reflects our deepest desires for a life free from want, conflict, and the relentless passage of time. The psychological grip these tales hold on us reveals a fascinating pattern in the human imagination. They all seem to emerge from a universal yearning for a better, simpler, or more just existence. They offer an escape from the complexities and injustices of the contemporary world, presenting an idealized alternative that embodies whatever our own society feels it is lacking. For cultures grappling with war and political turmoil, a myth of perfect peace like Shangri-La provides solace. For empires driven by material greed like Spain, a legend of infinite gold like El Dorado or the 7 cities justifies immense risk and effort. And for societies conscious of their own moral failings, a story like Atlantis serves as a powerful warning about the consequences of corruption. These lost worlds are less about geography and more about aspiration and anxiety, serving as blank screens onto which we project our collective hopes and fears. Where the Amazonian legend dramatically diverges is in its unique and powerful focus on gender. While Atlantis and Shangri-La are often portrayed as patriarchal societies led by wise kings or lamas, the Amazon myth centers entirely on the radical idea of female power and autonomy. Its defining characteristic is not just its isolation or its wealth, but its social structure, a world where women are the warriors, the leaders, and the guardians of their own destiny. This sets it apart as a story that challenges a fundamental pillar of most historical societies, patriarchy. It doesn't just offer an escape to a richer world, it presents an escape to a world where the entire traditional power structure is inverted. This makes it a far more subversive and psychologically complex myth, one that taps into deep-seated anxieties and fascinations about the role of women that are still potent today. Furthermore, the Amazon story possesses a crucial element of plausibility that pure fantasies like Atlantis often lack, a tangible connection to real, observable cultures. While no evidence of a sunken continent in the Atlantic has ever been found, archaeologists have indeed unearthed evidence of formidable warrior women among the Scythians and advanced populous societies within the Amazon rainforest itself. This grounding in partial historical reality gives the Amazon legend a unique staying power. It exists in that tantalizing space between confirmed history and pure myth, a gray area that fuels endless debate and exploration. We can never definitively prove Atlantis didn't exist, but we can point to mounting evidence that a society inspiring the Amazons very likely did. This kernel of truth transforms the legend from a mere fairy tale into a historical mystery, making the search for it feel less like a fantasy and more like a puzzle that could one day be solved. Examining these myths together reveals the fascinating mechanics of how legends are born and why they endure. They are rarely invented from nothing. More often, they begin with a kernel of something real, a traveler's account of a strange custom, the discovery of an unexplained ruin, or the observation of a unique natural phenomenon. This seed is then watered by cultural desires, fears, and prejudices, growing into a grand narrative that serves a specific purpose for the society that tells it. The Amazon myth grew from Greek encounters with nomadic steppe cultures, amplified by their own anxieties about gender, and was then supercharged by Spanish greed in the New World. Each culture that retold the story adapted it, adding new layers that reflected their own values and obsessions. This process shows us that legends are not static relics. They are living stories that evolve, reminding us that what we choose to search for in the unknown often tells us far more about ourselves than about the mysteries we hope to uncover. While the legend of the Amazon stands out for its sheer scale and cultural impact, the idea of women taking up arms and leading in battle is far from a singular Greek invention. In fact, when we cast our gaze across the globe and dig into the archaeological record, we find a rich tapestry of formidable female fighters woven into the history of countless civilizations, challenging the long-held notion that warfare was an exclusively male domain. Take the Viking world, for instance, where sagas and poems have long spoken of shield maidens fighting alongside men. For years, these accounts were dismissed as mere folklore, symbolic stories rather than historical fact. That changed dramatically with a groundbreaking discovery in Birka, Sweden. Archaeologists excavating a well-equipped high-status warrior's grave, complete with a full set of weapons, 2 horses, and a strategic battlefield board, were stunned when DNA analysis confirmed the remains were biologically female. This wasn't a woman buried with symbolic weapons. The arrangement and the trauma on her bones suggested a lifetime of combat experience, providing the first solid scientific evidence that the Viking shield maidens were very real. Journeying to West Africa, we encounter the historical reality of the Agoge, often called the Dahomey Amazons by European observers. This was not a mythical tribe but an elite, all-female military regiment within the kingdom of Dahomey in what is now Benin. These women were not auxiliary support. They were the king's most loyal and feared soldiers, rigorously trained from a young age, sworn to celibacy, and renowned for their ferocity and discipline. European colonists and missionaries who witnessed them in the 19th century wrote accounts filled with a mixture of shock, fear, and reluctant admiration. The existence of such a formal, state-sponsored corps of women warriors for centuries powerfully refutes any argument that organized female combatants are purely a figment of mythological imagination. In Asia, too, we find compelling examples. The story of Hua Mulan, immortalized in ballad and film, may be legendary, but it is rooted in a historical context where female warriors were a recognized, if not common, phenomenon. More concrete evidence comes from ancient Silla, one of the three kingdoms of Korea. There, the Hwarang were an elite warrior group, and while predominantly male, historical records confirm that women like Lady Jizo were not only trained in martial arts but also led troops into battle. Even further west, the nomadic Scythian and Sarmatian cultures, which roamed the vast steppes of Eurasia, have left us with the most direct parallel to our Amazon legend. As we've seen, their burial mounds continue to yield the remains of women interred with bows, arrows, swords, and armor, their bodies often showing clear signs of battle injuries. These were not ceremonial send-offs, they were honors bestowed upon respected warriors and leaders. This growing body of evidence forces a significant re-evaluation of traditional historical narratives, which have often been written through a patriarchal lens that either ignored women's roles in conflict or actively explained them away. For decades, the default assumption was that a skeleton buried with weapons was male, and any female remains found in such a context must be a wife or a symbolic offering. Modern science, particularly DNA and osteological analysis, is systematically dismantling these biases, proving that women's participation in warfare was more widespread and direct than previously acknowledged. They weren't always just victims or bystanders, they were strategists, fighters, and commanders. This doesn't mean every society had female warriors, but it firmly establishes that the phenomenon was a recurring reality across disparate cultures and continents, not a unique anomaly. So, what does this broader context tell us about the Amazon legend? It suggests that the Greeks, in crafting their stories of fierce, independent women, were likely amplifying a reality they had glimpsed at the edges of their known world. The concept wasn't born in a vacuum. The legend of the Golden Cities may belong to the realm of myth and colonial fantasy, but the core idea of women as skilled, respected, and fearsome warriors is firmly grounded in a global historical reality. The Amazons, therefore, can be seen as the Greek version of a universal archetype, a powerful, exaggerated reflection of real women who, throughout history, have defied expectations to claim a place on the battlefield. The quest for the Amazons and their golden cities has decisively shifted from the treasure maps of conquistadors to the meticulous survey grids of modern archaeologists, armed not with swords but with satellite data and ground-penetrating radar. This new era of exploration is defined by a fundamental change in objective. The goal is no longer to plunder but to understand. Leading this charge are dedicated researchers like Dr. Helene Silverman, whose extensive work on Peru's south coast has radically altered our perception of ancient Peruvian societies. While her focus isn't on warrior women, her methodologies exemplify the modern approach. By carefully studying the Nazca lines and associated settlement patterns, her work demonstrates how complex social organization and sophisticated cosmological knowledge flourished in landscapes once dismissed as barren. This shift in perspective, from seeking looted gold to appreciating intellectual and cultural achievement, is the bedrock of contemporary Amazonian research. The most revolutionary tool in this new arsenal is, without a doubt, LIDAR technology. While its use in Guatemala to reveal the staggering scale of Maya urbanism made global headlines, its application in the Amazon basin has been nothing short of paradigm-shattering. In Brazil, teams flying LIDAR surveys over the Xingu region have digitally stripped away the dense canopy to expose the ghostly outlines of a sprawling network of settlements. What appeared to the naked eye as undisturbed wilderness was in fact a meticulously planned landscape. The scans revealed extensive clusters of villages centered around large, circular plazas, all connected by a sophisticated system of wide, straight roads that ran for miles through the forest. These weren't mere paths, they were engineered causeways designed to remain functional even during the seasonal floods that inundate the region. This discovery points to a level of social coordination and urban planning that was unimaginable just a few decades ago, suggesting an interconnected society that could have supported tens of thousands of people. Beyond revealing urban layouts, this high-tech research is uncovering evidence of agricultural systems so advanced they put modern methods to shame. The key discovery here is terra preta, or Amazonian dark earth. This isn't natural soil, it is a human-made super soil, intentionally created by ancient inhabitants through a process of adding charcoal, pottery shards, and organic waste to the naturally infertile ground. This incredible biochar technology locks in nutrients and creates a rich, fertile land that remains productive for centuries. The presence of vast expanses of terra preta across the basin is the clearest possible evidence of large, sedentary populations who weren't just surviving in the Amazon. They were actively improving it, managing its resources with a sophistication we are only beginning to understand. They practiced agroforestry, cultivating gardens that mimicked the forest's natural diversity, growing countless varieties of fruits, nuts, and medicinal plants in a sustainable system that provided both food and economic stability. Crucially, the ethos of modern exploration is fundamentally collaborative and far less invasive. Today's archaeologists increasingly work in partnership with indigenous communities, recognizing that their oral histories and traditional knowledge are invaluable guides to the past. In the Xingu, researchers partnered with the Kwikuro people, whose stories of a great village their ancestors inhabited directly guided archaeologists to the discoveries at Kwikugu. This partnership is transformative, reframing the search from an external extraction of knowledge to a shared recovery of heritage. The Kwikuro don't see these ruins as a lost city, they see them as the home of their grandparents. Groundbreaking work is also being done by scientists like Professor Jonas Gregorio de Souza, who use LIDAR to identify countless earthworks across the southern Amazon, suggesting a previously unknown network of interconnected villages that challenges the old idea of the rainforest as a pristine, empty wilderness. While the dream of a metropolis constructed entirely of gold remains the stuff of legend, the reality emerging from the soil is in many ways more impressive. We are finding cities of earth, of pottery, and of ingeniously managed forest. These findings validate a poignant and tragic possibility that the early Spanish accounts of large, prosperous riverbank villages may have been reporting on a reality they barely understood. The populations that built these earthworks were likely decimated by European diseases like smallpox, which spread ahead of the explorers themselves. The empty jungle the conquistadors struggled through was in fact a recently collapsed world. Modern research, therefore, is not just finding new things, it is corroborating the very testimonies it once sought to debunk, revealing a rich, complex history of human achievement that was there all along, waiting for us to develop the humility and the technology to see it. Yet the legacy of this ancient legend extends far beyond dusty museums and history books, reaching directly into the most pressing modern issue facing the Amazon basin, its very survival. The enduring mystique of lost cities and the groundbreaking archaeological discoveries they inspired are profoundly reshaping our understanding of the rainforest, transforming it in the public consciousness from a pristine wilderness into a profoundly humanized landscape. For centuries, the dominant narrative, even among conservationists, was the pristine myth, the idea that the Amazon was a near-virgin ecosystem, largely untouched by human hands before the arrival of Europeans. This view, while well-intentioned, inadvertently painted indigenous peoples as either passive inhabitants of this Eden or, worse, as primitive threats to its purity. The modern discovery of vast, ancient earthworks and evidence of large, sophisticated societies fundamentally shatters that myth. We now understand that humans have not just lived in the Amazon for millennia. They have actively and intelligently shaped it, engineering the soil with terra preta to create astonishing fertility and managing the forest to enhance its productivity. This revelation is revolutionary because it reframes the entire conservation debate. The goal is no longer to preserve an untouched museum piece which never truly existed, but to learn from the long-term, sustainable partnership that ancient societies had with their environment. These findings powerfully validate indigenous knowledge, showing that their traditional practices of agroforestry and land management are not primitive, but are in fact the product of thousands of years of sophisticated ecological wisdom. This shift empowers local communities, positioning them not as victims of deforestation, but as the essential guardians and inheritors of a sustainable legacy, whose stewardship is critical for the future of the entire planet. This new, evidence-based understanding of the Amazon as a cultivated landscape is directly influencing conservation strategies on a global scale. The old model of creating fortressed conservation areas where human activity is excluded is increasingly being seen as insufficient and often culturally insensitive. Instead, there is a growing movement towards supporting indigenous land tenure and promoting bioeconomies. When indigenous peoples have secure legal rights to their ancestral territories, deforestation rates plummet. Their survival is intrinsically linked to the health of the forest. The discovery of ancient settlements provides a powerful historical precedent for this approach, proving that high levels of biodiversity can not only coexist with human presence but can actually be enhanced by it. Modern conservation projects are now looking to emulate the principles of those ancient Amazonians, promoting the cultivation of diverse native crops like acai, Brazil nuts, and cocoa in agroforestry systems that mimic the natural forest structure. This creates economic value from a standing, healthy forest, offering a sustainable alternative to the short-term gains of clear-cutting for cattle ranching or soy plantations. The legend, in a roundabout way, has given us the archaeological proof that a thriving human civilization and a thriving rainforest are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they are deeply interconnected. This turns the entire conversation from one of sacrifice and restriction to one of opportunity and synergy, where protecting the Amazon means learning from its deepest history to build a better future. Perhaps the most unexpected twist in this ancient tale is how the glamour of the Amazon legend has been harnessed as a potent tool for modern environmental advocacy. The romantic, adventurous quest for a lost city holds a powerful grip on the human imagination, a grip that conservation organizations have learned to leverage. By linking the fight to save the rainforest to the enduring mystery of what else might be hidden beneath its canopy, they can capture public attention in a way that raw statistics about carbon emissions simply cannot. Documentaries and articles now speak of laser-based archaeology revealing lost cities, instantly evoking a sense of wonder and urgency. The message is clear: if we destroy the rainforest, we are not just burning trees, we are obliterating untold chapters of human history and wiping away the evidence of sophisticated civilizations before we can even fully understand them. This framing makes the abstract tragedy of deforestation feel immediate and tangible. The legend provides a story, and people are moved by stories. The search for El Dorado once drew conquistadors seeking gold. Today, it draws a different kind of explorer: scientists, documentarians, and eco-tourists whose curiosity and reverence help fund research, generate media coverage, and build a global constituency for the Amazon's protection. The myth has been repurposed, transforming from a driver of exploitation into a rallying cry for preservation, ensuring that the real treasure we seek today is not gold, but the invaluable biodiversity and cultural heritage that this irreplaceable ecosystem holds. So after this incredible journey from the pages of ancient Greek poetry to the high-tech LIDAR scans of the modern rainforest, where does that leave us with our original question? Were the Amazons and their legendary cities of gold a reality, or were they nothing more than a captivating fantasy? The evidence, as we've seen, points to a complex and fascinating answer that lies somewhere in the middle, a blend of historical truth and powerful human imagination. We can say with growing confidence that the Amazons themselves were not a complete fiction. The archaeological discoveries across the Eurasian steppes are simply too compelling to ignore. The graves of Scythian and Sarmatian women, buried with their weapons and their battle scars, provide tangible proof that the Greeks were likely inspired by real, formidable women from the edges of their known world. These nomadic horse archers lived lives of authority and skill that would have been shocking to the patriarchal societies of the Mediterranean. And it is this cultural shockwave that reverberated through their myths, transforming observed reality into a legendary archetype of the ultimate outsider. The glittering cities of gold, however, belong to a different story altogether. This part of the legend is a colonial invention, a dangerous and seductive fantasy born from the collision of European greed and indigenous spiritual practices. The Spanish conquistadors, armed with their classical education and an insatiable lust for wealth, took the sacred gold of the Americas, a metal of profound spiritual significance, and superimposed it onto the pre-existing Amazon myth. They literalized the metaphor, hearing tales of a spiritual leader covered in gold dust and imagining a king who ruled a metropolis built of solid, lootable treasure. This fusion created the most powerful driving force in colonial exploration, a siren call that drew countless men to their doom and justified the exploitation of an entire continent. No such city has ever been found because it never existed in that form. It was a dream, a projection of deepest avarice onto the map of the unknown. Yet, in a breathtaking twist of irony, the relentless search for this fictional prize has ultimately led us to discover a truth far more valuable. Modern archaeology, freed from the shackles of the pristine myth, is now revealing that the Amazon was indeed home to sophisticated, large-scale societies. We haven't found golden palaces, but we have found cities of earth, vast geometric earthworks, complex road networks, and evidence of advanced agricultural science in the form of the miraculously fertile terra preta soil. These discoveries force us to rewrite history, showing that the early Spanish accounts of prosperous riverside villages may have been describing the last glimpses of a civilization already collapsing from introduced diseases. The real treasure was never a hoard of metal, but the incredible ingenuity of the people who managed and shaped the greatest rainforest on Earth for millennia. This entire saga teaches us a crucial lesson about the power of stories and the importance of distinguishing between myth and history. Myths are not lies, they are profound reflections of our fears, our desires, and our attempts to make sense of a complex world. They give us powerful symbols like the warrior woman that can be reclaimed and redefined for new generations. But history, uncovered through careful science and respect for evidence, gives us our foundation. It grounds our fantasies in a shared reality, and in doing so, often reveals a past more astonishing than any fiction. The search for the Amazon's golden cities may have been based on a misunderstanding, but it has inadvertently gifted us with a deeper appreciation for the rich tapestry of human culture and the endless capacity for discovery. The legend endures not because it is true, but because it speaks to something timeless in us, the unquenchable thirst to explore the unknown and to believe that the world still holds wonders waiting to be found. What do you think? Does knowing the historical reality behind the warrior women make the legend more or less compelling to you? And what other historical mysteries are you dying for us to explore next? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey from myth to reality, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next investigation into history's greatest enigma.